forward.
It's working. Looks like it's working to me.
It's working. Couldn't resist.
Probably one of the most quoted statements we have on the show is "It's working."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sadly, it's probably one of the most quoted Star Wars lines, and it's not because it's good, but it's because it's just a meme.
Well, I don't think we've had a lore episode where we don't quote Austin Powers.
Well, that's just because it's usually a man
baby,
disguised as something. So there's a lot of disguises in magic lore.
People be disguising.
That's right. Well, welcome back to our lore series, everyone. Today on the show, I suppose we should introduce ourselves as we normally do. I'm Kevin.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm Eric.
I'm Riley.
And, of course, we have our editor, Ainsley, joining us.
Of course, I'm Ainsley.
Thank you. And today on the show, we're continuing with Nemesis Part 2. Last week, we talked about most of our main characters returning to the Wrathy stronghold after Weatherlight's escape, as well as Eladamri's rebels returning to Skyshroud after their assault on that same stronghold. And we also introduced the former Skyshroud elf turned Phyrexian agent, Belbe, or Belbe, however you like to say it.
Belbe.
Yes, she was sent to Wrath by her masters to choose a new Evancar, and so far the candidates were two former crew members of Weatherlight. And we actually left off specifically with Crovax leading the Stronghold Expeditionary Force to Skyshroud in order to annihilate Eladamri's rebels and prove himself the rightful ruler of Wrath.
I feel like there's going to be more fighting and less completion this time.
Yeah.
Fun prediction.
That's a good prediction.
Yeah, usually the middle part of the lore series, if there's 3 parts, the second part usually has the most fighting and blood.
Well, he is a vampire.
Or glistening oil.
Yeah.
Oh,
Hey.
yes, right. Glistening
Yeah,
oil.
nice
Correct,
catch.
right.
So Crovax and his corps of sergeants rode in the rear of the expeditionary force.
In the rear.
In the rear.
I don't I'm laughing at
Wow.
You know?
Am I 5?
Sometimes you just gotta be.
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
I mean, everybody
So
was
they-
thinking it, right? Somebody had to say it.
I guess I wasn't thinking about it when I wrote it, but regardless. They used Perchers to relay orders to the various parts of the army. In case you're wondering, Perchers were another one of Volrath's creations. They were pigeon-sized flyers with leathery blue wings and flaring trumpet-shaped mouths.
Yeah, look at the
Provided
snoot
a
on
picture
that
from our
bad boy.
co-hosts.
That was a snoot.
Yo, there are 2 Perchers printed in Magic.
Yeah, there's a regular one, and then a Belbe has one.
Yeah.
Both
Is
from this
it
set.
called Belbe's Percher?
You got it.
Nice.
What is the actual creature type on that, Eric?
Bird.
Okay, it's just a kind of bird, so they can go in your bird tribal deck.
There you go.
There you go.
So they were capable of understanding simple commands and could repeat short messages verbatim. So that's how they communicated with their, and they also used them around the stronghold as well. It was just before nightfall when the army reached the outpost of Sharif. The outpost was a 2-story blockhouse that sat at the edge of one of Wrath's flowstone seas, and only hours earlier the outpost had other visitors, Eladamri's rebels. Eladamri and his men made quick work of the 48 soldiers stationed at the outpost, and they were about to burn it down when they spotted the huge dust cloud raised by Crovax's oncoming army. And rather than be caught in the open by a vastly superior force trying to kind of escape, Eladamri kept his warriors inside and sent some of the en-Vec warriors disguised as stronghold soldiers out to meet Crovax.
Smart guy.
Yeah. That group was led by a doll man called Darset. And when Crovax arrived with his army, they drank a bunch of water from the outpost's cisterns, which is kind of like a well, I think. And Crovax asked if they'd encountered any rebel activity in the past few hours. Darset claimed everything had been quiet. And with that taken care of, Crovax ordered the army to move out, and he planned to make the march all night. So they'd marched all day, all night, no rest. So once they were gone, Darset went inside to see what Eladamri planned to do next. His plan to destroy every outpost from Sky Shroud to the stronghold hadn't changed, but with the knowledge that Crovax was leading an army to his home meant that he had to send word to his people to leave their villages and travel deeper into the forest.
Hey, people.
Hey, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What you doing? Get out of here.
So once the army was out of sight, Eladamri and his crew set fire to the outpost and headed for Sky Shroud. And they did that to a bunch of outposts. They rolled up on them, killed everybody, burned them down.
That's sad.
It's pretty wasteful.
Well, I mean, it's war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they took the stuff. They took their stuff.
They
didn't-
pillaged?
They pillaged. They got to
pillaged,
pillage.
yeah.
They're like a nomad army.
I hope they didn't R. Because usually R
No.
goes along with pillaging.
Well, the book doesn't cover it, but
Oh, good.
they're good guys. Good guys usually.
You know they're going in the
It's
back.
true. They're going in the rear.
They're going, yeah, the old cistern. So
Oh, boy.
So Crovax and his army did indeed march all night, but it was worth it because near daybreak they were rewarded when a scout spotted a group of elves on the open plain. Not rebels though, just a hunting party, mostly young men, like teenagers. Crovax ordered that they be captured, and when they were brought to him for questioning, he immediately ordered that 5 of the 8 elves be beheaded. And then he killed 2 more with a mixture of flowstone manipulation and brute force after they wouldn't give up the location of Eladamri's home. And then the last elf, Valen was his name, gave up the location without even having to be asked.
Well, he's like the last one left. So the other ones
Yeah,
didn't
I
know
mean-
that he gave it up.
Eladamri lives in the village of Sweetwater. He left there 5 days ago to meet Dalcor and Vec chiefs to convince them to join the rebellion.
He's like, I'm not scared at all. I'm sassy.
Yeah, because he's a teenager.
Yeah, he's just like, ooh, you killed all
he's-
my friends. I ain't scared.
Oh yeah, I guess. do
That's
you,
good.
want, do you want me to?
No,
be
I like what you
scared?
did. I like what you did. Yeah. So
I made an artistic decision.
yeah, it works.
I just watched 7 people die, but like,
Ooh, you're big and scary.
You got them strong arms.
It's because when you give us the quotes, there's no context.
Yeah.
So I practice them ahead of time, but I don't know. I guess,
Yeah.
I practice a certain tone.
Yeah, it seems to be more fun that way. So, anyways, Valen asked that his life be spared, and Crovax obliged by punching him in the face so hard that he fell to the ground unconscious.
Oof.
Then Crovax ordered that he be placed in his personal luggage until they reached their destination.
Like, hang on, in Crovax's personal luggage or in the dude's personal luggage? Like his
No, they
little
didn't.
elven luggage.
He didn't have any luggage.
Just
It was
cram
just
him in
it's
there,
just
boys.
it's just Crovax's luggage. Crovax has, I guess, brought a bunch of luggage with him.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Well, fun fact, apparently, so Justin Bieber, Canadian pop star Justin Bieber, was very popular, still is, but would have all these crazy fans going nuts every time he went anywhere. That one time, apparently, he hid in a hockey duffel bag, and a security guard carried him out in a duffel bag so that he wouldn't get attacked by fans.
It is fun to
Sneaky.
hide in a big piece of a bag or luggage
Yeah.
or something.
as you
Yeah,
go by,
I
like,
definitely-
ha, got these people, they'll find me.
So, after that, Crovax ordered the army move out, but Eladamri and a small scouting party were hidden in the waves of the Flowstone Sea, and they'd been watching. A couple of Eladamri's compatriots, elves called Galan and Cardamel, wanted to save Valen, but come on, they're not. What are they gonna do?
What are you gonna do? Save
What are you
me?
gonna do about it?
Yeah, because if they tried to save them, there's a far superior force. They would just get kidnapped too, or be killed. In spite of all that, Eladamri had a plan to destroy the entire stronghold army. He explained that in less than a day, the army would reach Sky Shroud, but by then, it would be so stretched out from the long walk that, they'd be stretched out so they wouldn't be all together and they wouldn't be a cohesive fighting force. And that's something that I didn't actually think about with these more I guess, like medieval armies, if they have to march, they all have to stay in formation. So like if you have a force of like 20,000 guys and it's like, I don't know, how many wide are you going to do? Like maybe 20?
Yeah, it's like how much
Maybe
space do you have?
More?
And obviously,
it's like you got to wait. Yeah, till they,
That's
how long are you
10,000
waiting
rows.
at the end? If you're like in the last row, how long are you waiting till everybody moves out?
Or there's 1,000 rows.
Yeah.
Yeah. You think city traffic's bad? Oof.
No kidding. Yeah. Or if you fall down or something and you're in the middle,
Yeah, you're done.
Yikes.
You're done. That's the end of your career.
you're like way done.
you just got demoted. You are now back a few rows.
A corpse. Yeah.
You're now a corpse.
So, anyways, the combination of Skyshroud warriors, the Dahl, and the Vec would be a few thousand strong, and they'd strike the army just before dawn, when most of them would be asleep. Because by that point, I guess like the last night, Crovax is like, okay, we're kind of going to make camp, and you guys can go to sleep, and then we'll
Be refreshed and
then we'll, yeah.
be ready for battle.
So, yeah. So after hearing his plan, everybody was on board. Like we mentioned, he's a smart guy, except for Galen and Cardamel. They hung back to discuss what should be done about Valen. Galen basically said, we can't go against Eladamri's orders, and Cardamel's like, yeah, but we should save this guy because I'm related to him some way, like cousins or something. And Galen's like, you know what? If you slip away unnoticed, I'll forget about this conversation. So that's what he did.
Nice.
That's what Cardamel did, and he took 3 other elves with him, and they snuck away and tracked down Crovax's army. The whole thing, too, they don't explain it very well, because they're essentially going in the same direction. Because they're just on a big flat plain, so I don't know how easy it is to, like, hide until you get to the forest, but anyways.
Maybe there was like a hill or something.
Just one giant hill.
Maybe it's like tall wheatgrass. You can kind of like hunker down and like,
Yeah. So while Crovax and Eladamri played cat and mouse, Belbe was leading 2 stronghold guards carrying an injured Ertai to Volrath's laboratory. Before her arrival on Wrath, her benefactors supplied her with a complete inventory of the stronghold, including items in Volrath's suite of rooms. So when they arrived in the laboratory, Belbe knew she would find the device that was capable of healing all Ertai's injuries. Volrath had designed and built the machine to heal animals he'd surgically altered, but it was also capable, on a higher setting, of mutating creatures into drastically different forms.
What in the
So,
heck?
at the base of the device sat a large circular slab of crystal. The top of the slab was grooved with 5 concentric rings, while the sides were lined with narrow vertical flutes. The slab was situated beneath an elaborate metal tripod 15 feet tall, and that part of the device actually resembled the stronghold itself, if that helps you imagine it. Anyway, the tripod supported a second faceted crystal about half the diameter of the slab below it, with wires attached to it that ran off into the laboratory in all directions. Those wires led to various power stones that were used to power the lab's contraptions. So, Belbe ordered the guards to help Ertai onto the large slab at the base of the device while explaining what it was for. Ertai was dubious of the potential results, but he was none too fond of his injuries, so he decided to let events play out. And he had no illusions about becoming Evankar, but he did think that if he were well again, he might be able to escape the stronghold, make it back to Portal Canyon, activate the portal, and travel home to Dominaria.
The loss of such a talented wizard would be an infamous crime, a terrible loss to civilization.
And either way, Belbe went to the shielded control station where the controls for the device were located. She told the guards to stand back from the platform holding Ertai, made a few adjustments to the control panel, and the machine did its work. It was a strange sensation, dark energy in its pure form. Ertai discovered that it felt cold, and his body felt flooded by ice that spread from his chest down each of his limbs and head. In spite of the sensation, it did blot out the pain from his injuries. So what did it matter if he was infused with black mana?
Oh.
So he climbed off the platform, fully healed, but when he tried to materialize a flame on the tip of his finger, it was black instead of normal fire color.
That's badass.
And he was able to turn the flame back to a more natural color, but he had not intended for it to be black when he created it. And so the moral of the story is probably don't get into strange machines.
Or you'll be infused with black mana.
The end.
The end. So, Belbe beckoned Ertai to follow her out of the lab because it was time for a proper bath, and as he was leaving, he saw 2 empty suits of armor standing near the door. The men inside, the 2 guards who'd brought him there, were gone. And naturally he asked Belbe where they'd gone, and that's when his foot snagged something soft and his question was answered. He looked down to see a 5-foot-long gray slug, and then a second one nudging at one of the suits of armor. Nonplussed, Belbe said mildly,
Perhaps I used too high a setting after all.
yeah, turn them into slugs.
Yeah.
I don't know how, but...
Oh,
no,
so
the
she
slug setting.
did the machine on those guys too, I guess?
Well, it's because they weren't in the machine, but I don't know, because they
Oh.
were standing near it. They don't really give an explanation about it. They're
Sure,
just slugs
but like
now.
it exudes like
Yeah.
the mana and like the power and stuff, so they would get hit by it. That makes sense.
Belbe took Ertai to the Evankar suite for a bath. While bathing and chatting with Belbe about his candidacy for Evankar, Grevin was on the underside of the Citadel supervising the repairs to the airship. That's when that rascal Fura showed up. You guys remember him?
Fura.
Fura. Fishers, what is it? Fishers of Men? Something like... Anyways, while Grevin was looking over Predator schematics, he noticed the ethereal core standing not 2 feet away from him. When Grevin asked him how he'd gotten into the stronghold, Fura introduced himself as one of the Fishers of Men. The Fishers of Men lived just outside the city of traders, and because of that, they were more concerned with their standing in the stronghold than certain other rebellious wrathy factions. So, Fura informed Grevin about the meeting with Eladamri, the doll and the Vec he'd attended. He told Grevin what the rebels were planning, and he decided to take that information to someone higher up on the stronghold food chain. He found Belbe in the Evankar suite with the bathing Ertai, and when Grevin saw that, he was understandably dumbfounded. He'd gotten everything he'd needed from the young wizard and had left him in the dungeon to die. And when he asked Belbe why she'd brought him to the suite, she explained that Ertai was up for the role of Evankar. And Grevin was speechless, and Belbe took that opportunity to inquire about Grevin's candidacy for Evankar.
Which reminds me, Lord Grevin, would you like to be considered for Evankar as well? You have many years of effective service on your side, and manifest talents for the job.
There it was, plainly stated at last. Grevin had pondered this possibility since Volrath's departure, and he knew what his answer must be.
Thank you, Your Excellency, but I must decline.
As you choose. But why?
I'm content to remain a loyal servant to the throne.
It would mean the end of the control rod.
I've considered that. I served Volrath for many years, and I've seen firsthand the effect unfettered power had on him. I would rather be the blade than the hand that wields it.
Yeah, so it's just the 2 of them, the Crovax and Ertai vying for Evankarship, because he was the only other candidate.
Nice.
But of course, in a a one-on-one like fight, Crovax would definitely win, even at his current power level. So, with that taken care of, Grevin arrived at the reason for his visit. He explained to Belbe what the core Fura had told him about the alliance between Eladamri's elves and the Dahl and the Vec tribes, and what Crovax was likely marching into. And Grevin also asked if he could take what was left of their army to aid Crovax in Skyshroud. And even though he thought it was unlikely he would reach them before the rebel strike. Regardless, Belbe wouldn't allow Grevin or anyone else to aid Crovax. The mission had been Crovax's idea, a mission intended to display his qualifications for becoming Evankar, and he would have to succeed or fail on his own. Grevin didn't care, though, about Crovax and would have preferred his failure, but he worried about the loss of so many soldiers, his best among them. But what the emissary said went, so Grevin moved on to his next concern. He feared that if Crovax failed to pacify the rebellion, the Dahl, Vec, and Kor living in the city of traders would revolt against the stronghold. Remember, that's the city beneath the citadel. And that's when Ertai suggested that they take hostages. He explained that they should take hostages from the leading Dahl, Vec, and Kor families until things settled. It's which is, I think, a pretty good idea. Grevin and Belbe liked the idea, so Belbe got in touch with Dorian, who knew many of the leading families in the city, and he decided how many and who would be taken, then Grevin rounded them up. The whole process took about 8 hours, and by the time they finished, the sun was beginning to rise. They'd spent that time gathering 2,000 hostages from each tribe for a total of 6,000 people, and they led them out of the city to some nearby ruins, and Grevin did that with 2,000 soldiers and another 2,000 Mogs to keep the hostages under control until things settled and they could return them to the city of traders.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of people, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of hostages to take. I thought they were going to do, like 20, 30 or something of like high-powered people.
I guess at the stronghold, you got to go big or go home.
Yeah.
So, just as the previous night fell, while Grevin was beginning to gather hostages, Crovax and his army arrived near the edge of the Skyshroud Forest. Crovax allowed the weary army to halt and make camp for the night. He planned to penetrate the forest at first light. So this whole thing took I think it's about 3 days. But Crovax would soon find out that nothing would go according to plan. While the army was setting up camp, Crovax sent the 12 condemned officers into the forest to find a safe route for the following morning. After their initial probes, only 8 of the men returned. The other 4 were never seen again. But those that did return to report to Crovax claimed the forest was rife with deadly obstacles. More interestingly, they found not a single track made by an elf. It's because they used the trees.
Ah.
So, Crovax did what any good leader would do. He sent the exhausted men back into the forest, ordering that they shouldn't return until they found safe passage to Eladamri's village.
Well, they're all going to die. Bye.
Yeah. I don't think they get reinstated as officers. Let's just leave it at that. So, after the army made camp and Crovax was alone in his tent, he opened the piece of luggage Valen was stored in. It's Crovax's luggage. And by that point, the young elf had awoken from the earlier knock on the head. Crovax had stored him in a large brass chest, and when he opened it, why'd you bring an empty chest? But anyways.
For treasure.
You never know when you got to store a person.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, when you're insane like Crovax is.
Yeah.
You're telling me you're not going on a trip to the States or something. It's we're going to go to Vegas. You got to leave room in your suitcase for souvenirs.
Free shopping. Yeah.
Yeah.
Free humans.
Yeah.
So he opened the chest and he said,
Hello.
He reached in and dragged out the elf prisoner, Valen. The youth's hands and feet were chained, and a strip of rag gagged his mouth. Crovax sat down on a pile of carpets and regarded his prisoner.
Do you believe in curses, boy? You should believe. They're real.
This guy, he's okay, I'm packing my empty little chest, and I'm packing my little pile of carpets in case I need to get cozy.
I know, why does he have carpets? So then he explained everything we already know, the amulet that bound Selenia to his family, its destruction, her death, and his first transformation that into the creature that killed Miri, and then the second one that occurred during his time on Phyrexia. And he finished by explaining his newfound power to absorb the life force of the near dead, saying that,
So far, I've only tasted life from the dying. Tonight, I'll dine on the living.
Valen struggled to reach the door of the tent, but Crovax caught him in 2 steps and grabbed him by the head.
It's an honor, really. At least I know your name, Valen. The thousands who follow you will be as anonymous as cattle.
And just like that, Crovax sucked the young elf dry.
That's what he gets for being sassy earlier
Yeah.
when he should have been afraid.
Yes.
So shortly after Crovax deprived us of Valen's company, the 4 elf rescue party arrived at the outskirts of the camp, just in time. Cardamel and his companions, Kamiko, Darian, and Sanyu, were successful in infiltrating the camp, and 2 of them, Kamiko and Darian, made their way to Crovax's tent, while Cardamel and Sanyu hid nearby to keep a lookout. And they didn't know exactly where the tent was at first, so when they encountered their first Vec soldier. They sort of kidnapped him and held him hostage while he led them to the tent in question. When the two elves and the Vec soldier entered the tent, they traveled through what seemed like a maze of canvas rooms until they reached one big one. In it, they saw Valen's lifeless body lying on the floor and Crovax sitting on that same pile of carpets in what seemed like a drunken stupor.
Sitting on my pile of carpets.
We don't have mattresses.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I guess they didn't really have, like, inflatable mattresses or whatever.
Just a pile of carpets.
Bring my carpet. Yeah.
I got my carpet chest, I got my empty chest. So, whatever it was, Crovax didn't seem to notice when Kamiko approached Valen's body. The young elf was definitely dead, but he didn't appear to have any signs of violence on him. Spooky.
Kevin waggled his fingers when you said that, FYI.
So, rewind it and imagine that.
Yeah, rewind it.
So, while the two elves were in awe about that fact, the Vec soldier that Darian was sort of using like a human shield used the elves' surprised state to try to escape from Darian's clutches, and the two fell to the floor of the tent, grappling for Darian's knife in a pile of carpets. No, I added the carpet thing. So, Kamiko was about to help Darian when Crovax rose from his stupor and grabbed the elf by the wrist. So, Kamiko drew his knife with his other hand, but before he could use it on Crovax, the Ascendant Evenkar grabbed that wrist and crushed it.
Ooh.
Boom.
Yeah.
Ouch.
So the novel's ambiguous about the fate of the two elves, but they're probably killed during their encounter with Crovax because shortly after this, the camp erupts in alarm and Cardamel and Sanyu overhear cries that assassins were trying to kill their commander, so they just decided to run for it.
Help, assassins! Help!
So, unfortunately for them, a couple of cavalry sentries saw them running and gave chase. Realizing this, Cardamel and Sanyu split up. The two sentries remained on Cardamel's trail, but he was able to kill both of them, and after that, he just kept on running. And again, it's more exciting in the book. I'm kind of
I was running.
Run! So, the novel doesn't, again, explain what happened to Sanyu, but he probably died because there's no further mention of him in the book. So, when Cardamel was confident there was no one on his trail, he stopped and crouched down in the tall grass to rest. And that's when he heard the unmistakable voice of Eladamri. He's a Dami.
Get up.
He looked up into the grim face of Eladamri. Cardamel opened his mouth to speak, but the rebel leader cut him off with a curt wave of his hand.
Save your entreaties. You disobeyed me, Cardamel. How many warriors did you lose on your Mog's errand?
Mutely, Cardamel held up 3 fingers.
This man.
Did you hold up 3 fingers?
I shook them.
So that's the price we pay for your night of foolishness.
Yeah.
That's a really good Eladamri voice.
It is really good.
That's really good.
You accomplished nothing, and our men have died.
Yeah, it's not great. So just then, a courier ran up with a message for Eladamri. It was from Tant Jova, letting him know that because the Stronghold camp was on high alert, they had found the Vec warriors hiding at the edge of the Stronghold swamp. And at that point, it wasn't even midnight, hours before the planned attack, and in the distance, the 3 elves could hear the sounds of battle growing. So, Eladamri got messages to the core and elf factions waiting deeper in the forest and began the battle. So the actual battle didn't last that long because some of the Vec warriors started a fire in the brush surrounding the Stronghold camp, and that fire quickly began to move from the brush to the maze of tents making up the camp, and by that point, Eladamri had returned to the edge of the forest where a group of elf warriors had mustered, and that's when he saw Crovax emerge from the camp, screaming and challenging Eladamri to fight him face to face. It's like, no way, buddy, I'm not doing that. Crazy.
Get out here and fight
I'm gonna fight you face to face.
Some like
The guy hasn't survived this long.
yeah, that's. It's just some like muscly roid rage dude comes out. Fight me! I'm like, no.
It's not even fair.
He silently declined Crovax's challenge, but he did order segments of his warriors to form an offensive perimeter around the sides of the camp that weren't surrounded by fire. Then the rebels, screaming, shouting, and banging their weapons against their shields, closed in on the stronghold soldiers. The flustered soldiers formed a hollow square and fended off waves of rebel attacks, the dead and wounded piling up deeper each time a fresh attack broke over them. And gradually, the exhausted stronghold line was pushed backward, changing from a square to a narrow triangle. Eladamri kept the pressure on throughout the night while segments of his force were set away to safety in the forest, and by daybreak, most of them had escaped into the forest and the fire had died. The stronghold camp was pretty much burned to the ground by then, and of the 10,000 soldiers that arrived at the edge of the forest the night before, 2,000 were dead, with another 3,000 wounded.
Whoa.
And only a few hundred Mogs remained. But they weren't necessarily killed. The book says that maybe they just ran off. So things weren't looking too good for Crovax at that point. And it wasn't all celebrations for Eladamri and his crew, because with far slender resources, their losses numbered just over 100 elves, 3 dozen Dahl, and nearly 200 of Tant Jova's en-Vec nomads. And on top of that, they weren't able to plunder the stronghold army's weapons and supplies due to the fire, which was what they were, really hoping for. They gotta plunder. So the battle was sort of a draw, but it was the first time in their shared history that Wrathy natives had beaten stronghold forces in battle, even though they didn't really win. And as disappointed as Eladamri was, Tant Jova saw this as a victory, and that they could use it to rally more rebels to their cause. In any case, she explained to Eladamri,
Another thing, perhaps most important of all, I have this morning received a summons from the Oracle en-Vec. She has tidings, she says, of the Corvax doll.
good old lady voice, by the way.
Thanks.
That's kind of going back to our Wrath and Storm series, where we first met the Oracle en-Vec, and she thought Gerard might have been the Corvax doll, which was the fabled deliverer of Vec prophecy, a hero that would overthrow the stronghold and lead the people of Wrath to freedom. But by that point in the story, Gerard had left Wrath on Weatherlight, so the Oracle and the Vec were pretty sure that Gerard was not the Corvax doll.
I miss Gerard. I miss Karn.
He's in the next one.
Oh, good.
Well, he's in the one after that, but the next one's just going to be short because it's
It's a novella.
it's sort of like all three of these books in this trilogy are like standalone books, and this one is like the most standalone of all. But like Teferi comes back in it, and Baron and Rain there in it, so it's pretty much just going to be about them, but just it's going to be tight.
Excited. Karn's a good boy.
Yes. Anyway, Eladamri, Tant Jova, and a large part of their rebel army headed to Corre, which was an elven holy site deep in the forest where the Oracle waited. Hooray! With a K! So, before we move on to the next part of the story, we need to mention that during that same night that we just mentioned, the Belbe made her first inspection of the flowstone factory beneath the stronghold. 5 Mogs accompanied her, carrying the monitoring device her master sent with her, and when she located the smart control station in the factory, she installed the monitoring device so she'd be able to keep tabs on flowstone production. In addition to monitoring, the device also superseded the control station's control, leaving her and whoever the next Evancar ended up being in complete control of flowstone production. So the Mogs also carried the transplanar portal device Belbe brought with her, and after she was finished on the factory level, she led the Mogs to Volrath's dream halls. Once there, she hid the device for later use. Then she made a mental note to order Grevin to have the Mogs accompanying her executed at his earliest convenience. And then she went to look for Grevin. No witnesses.
No witnesses.
That's right.
They're just Mogs.
So that took most of the night, and by daybreak, Belbe was making her way to the lower airship dock, where Predator was being repaired. By then, her hull was reassembled, and new deck fittings were being installed. All that remained was the installation of her engine, rigging, and weaponry. Belbe found Grevin's Vec foreman and asked where he was. The foreman hadn't seen Grevin since the day before, so she went to leave. And on her way out, the foreman asked Belbe to tell Lord Grevin to return to the dock as soon as possible, as they didn't dare try to install the engine without his supervision. And once one of the dock guards also informed Belbe that Grevin was probably in the ruins beyond the city of traders, and of course, that's where he was. And remember Predator's engine, it's like sort of like semi-sentient, and it can like walk around. It's like a Phyrexian creation. I think we talked about that during Wrath of the Storm. It's pretty cool. Unfortunately, they don't get into it in this book. But so the guard also informed Belbe that was where Grevin and Dorian had taken the doll, Vec, and Kor hostages, suggested by Ertai and greenlit by her. So naturally, she wanted to find out exactly what was going on with the hostages, but without Predator airworthy, the trip to the ruins would take considerable time. But that's when Ertai showed up looking for her, and she informed him of her dilemma, and he told her that he could ferry her to the ruins faster than any airship. So Belbe was on board for whatever, and Ertai sat down cross-legged on the deck floor, pressed his hands together, and magically manifested what looked like a giant predatory bird. An illusion. Yeah. Ertai beckoned the bird toward himself, and when it arrived, it scooped him up by the waist in one of its talon claws and did the same for Belbe. Then he guided the phantom bird down to the ruins. When they arrived, they found the hostages filling the makeshift stockades, and Grevin having a little picnic with Dorian en-Vec.
On a pile of carpets.
Always the carpets. So when they saw her approaching, they both stood up, bowed, and greeted her. The first thing she wanted to know was a rundown of the hostages. But when she found out that most of them were women, children, and the aged, she wasn't pleased. If Crovax failed to defeat Eladamri's rebellion, or any harm came to the hostages, then the able-bodied Dalvec and Kor men living in the city of traders might also rebel against their Phyrexian masters. And Crovax obviously hadn't won the battle against Eladamri, a fact that none of them were aware of, so they waited for his triumphant return. So, what happened to Crovax in the battle? You guys are probably wondering.
What happened to Crovax in the battle?
He survived. He survived, and he spent the following 2 days sequestered in a makeshift tent, which was just a single stall with a canvas roof and
no pile of carpets.
no pile of carpets.
Oh,
Lost his
He
carpets.
lost them.
too bad.
That's his power source. So, command of what was left of the Stronghold army fell to Nasser, who organized the dead to be burned and the living accounted for, along with the supplies. That process took that same amount of time, that 2 days, and while it was underway, Nasser sent scout parties into the forest to search for signs of Eladamri's forces. And of course, they found no traces of the rebels because they didn't look in the trees. But by then, Crovax had emerged from his tent once, telling his sergeants that the army would be returning to the stronghold. Then, when the army was ready to march, Nasser approached Crovax's makeshift tent to find out if he was ready. And as he did, he heard a muffled thud and saw a cloud. I just keep thinking of piles of carpet. He heard a muffled thud and saw a cloud of dust whirling around the tent. Then shafts of white light burst from every crack and crevice in the canvas walls, and Nasser threw his arms in front of his face, and the tent collapsed with a spurt of gray dust and ash and carpets. So Nasser inspected the pile of canvas and dirt, but Crovax was nowhere to be found. So he followed Crovax's last order and began the long march back to the stronghold. What do you guys think happened to him?
Where the hell's Crovax?
Oh, did Yawgmoth do that thingy again?
Oh, that's a good guess. Yeah, that's a good guess.
Probably turned into a bat and flew away.
So by that point, Predator was airborne again. Once the hostages were secured, Grevin returned to the airship dock and oversaw the installation of her engine, rigging, and final repairs to her hull, and all that was left was her weaponry. And while that was going on, Belbe was making one of her periodic rounds of the Citadel. First, she stopped at the library and found Ertai, whose physical appearance had changed quite a bit due to his continued use of Volrath's healing device. And I'm realizing now I forgot to mention, so it doesn't like permanently heal you. You have to keep doing it, because if you go in for one treatment and then you wait a while, your injuries return.
Oh.
So it doesn't heal you. It just kind of like temporarily heals you, but you're not really healed.
More of like an illusion.
So he has to keep doing it. Yeah. That's black mana for you. As he was sitting in the library reading, Belbe was disturbed by what she saw. Never a muscular guy previously, Ertai's upper body was now covered with ropey muscles, making him look like a lesser version of Greven. And his hair was also no longer bright blonde. Now it was a copper brown color. Ertai wasn't concerned, though. In addition to the physical changes he'd experienced, his capacity for new information and his control over Flowstone was also expanding. He told Belbe that he'd been reading 8 books a day, and he would soon get through the entire library. Although she was impressed with his newfound abilities, she warned him again that he needed to be careful with Volrath's healing device, but he just buried his face in another book, so she left to inspect the Flowstone production facility.
Well, it's like, if it only temporarily heals you, like, what are you supposed to do about your injuries?
Well, you just kind of, I guess you let them return, and then, you go to the hospital.
Properly heal them?
Yeah. So, once she located the control room, she checked the monitoring device she'd installed, and she found that the facility was overproducing Flowstone at an inefficient level to keep up with demand. The Rathi overlay and everything that goes along with that. So she attempted to correct the production issue by hand, but like the many mechanisms in the stronghold, it was self-correcting, so anything she did would be fixed by the mechanism controlling production. And regardless, she adjusted the output meter, but while she was doing that, she noticed a small white ball of light about 2 feet wide circling and descending the energy column that programmed the Flowstone. Then it shot up beyond the upper airship dock and out of sight. So she followed it. After searching high and low, Belbe found the phantom intruder in the dream halls, but the ball of light had materialized into Crovax.
No.
He could teleport now.
Ooh.
That's how he teleports.
It's kind of like a
She doesn't
bat.
fly on magic carpets.
No, he just teleports. Yeah, I fly on my pile of magic carpet.
I mean, if you think a ball of light's the same as a bat, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
It's basically the same thing.
It's close enough.
Yeah. They both eat mosquitoes.
And so he greeted Belbe, and her first question was,
What about the army? Why did you leave them?
My army? Worthless, cowardly cattle. I would have killed them all if I were Eladamri.
You lost your entire army?
I lost little of value.
How many survived? Where are they now?
Who are you to question me?
I am the emissary of the overlords. I ask you again, where is your army?
Out there, we fought a night battle. The rebels started a fire upwind of our position, and many of the soldiers were trapped by the flames.
And Eladamri?
He escaped.
You failed.
This is only the first round. There are many acts yet to play.
A new Evengar must be named soon.
Then name me. Who else can you choose? Greven? He's been a slave too long to know how to rule.
There is another candidate.
the flowstone around Belbe heaved like a sea swell. She ignored it, and when it was calm again, she said,
I refer to Ertai.
That boy? Do the overlords know you're considering that arrogant little cur?
The overlords know everything I do. Ertai has magical gifts far in excess of anyone else on Wrath. His influence over Flowstone grows daily.
Can he command an army? Can he govern? Can he rule?
Those are questions still unanswered about you, Crovax. As for Ertai, he's intelligent, clever, and has many insights. It was Ertai, for example, who devised the stratagem of taking hostages from the local population to ensure they wouldn't lend support to Eladamri's rebels.
Hostages? What a delightful idea. I give the pup credit. How many hostages?
1,000.
why she gave him the wrong figure, she didn't know.
Where are they?
The ruins outside of the city of traders.
I see. Thank you, Excellency.
Then Belbe demanded a full report of Crovax's failed attempt to pacify the rebels, and he left to get a good look at the hostages. It's like winking at a couple.
No.
So after that, Belbe went back to the airship docks, found Grevin, and ordered him to take Predator to intercept the Stronghold army, pick them up, and bring them home. So that's what he did. But it was before they had time to equip Predator with her onboard weapons.
Ooh.
So, by that point, the army was only 1 day's march from the Stronghold, which is where Predator picked them up. Nasser was ready for the third degree from Grevin, but the airship captain simply seemed pleased that so much of his army had survived Crovax's Mog's errand. It's from the book, instead of saying fools. Anyways, Nasser and the other sergeants filled Grevin in on the battle with the rebels and the aftermath while they returned to the Stronghold. They also told him they didn't know where Crovax was, something that Grevin was pleased to hear. Grevin thought that no matter his fate, he had surely lost any chance at becoming Evenkar. And Grevin's a real sympathetic character in this one. I like it. So, on their way back, they spotted a group of elves about 40 strong. Grevin brought Predator about and descended on the group. Once she was close enough to them, Grevin had led a large group of his soldiers against the elves and massacred them. Half a dozen of the elves escaped to tell the tale, though.
They're floating around up there and just like hitting parties of elves.
Yeah, just jumping out, getting them.
Everybody watch out. Hide your kids.
Hide kids, hide wife, and hide husband. Everybody out here. You don't have to come and confess. Okay, I could go on. But I won't.
They're going to
That's
find
good. That is a very good bit.
Oh, it's
That's a
so good.
bit. So, back at the Stronghold, Dorian had discovered that all 6,000 en-Vec and core hostages were missing, as well as the soldiers guarding them. So while he was looking for Belbe to inform her of that, he also ran into Ertai, explained the situation to him, and Ertai was also pretty upset because he had suggested the whole thing. So he followed Dorian in his search, and they eventually found Belbe trashing Volrath dream halls, just just taking out the trash.
Wow.
So she was furious after her last chat with Crovax, and she was taking out her frustration on one of his dream orbs. So Dorian explained that when some Stronghold guards arrived at the ruins with food and water for the hostages that morning, they were gone. But there were footprints leading away from the ruins toward a series of tunnels that led to the death pits. And so we mentioned the death pits in our Wrath and Storm series, but just to refresh everyone's memories, they were a series of chambers beneath the Stronghold filled with an oily black, semi-sentient substance that was a byproduct of flowstone production. The chambers separated the furnaces of Wrath and the Stronghold itself, and the substance that filled them was rumored to consume anything that got too close to it. So with that in mind, it's understandable that Dorian, Ertai, and Belbe were concerned about the fate of the hostages. But in any case, the three of them made the trip to the ruins, and while they did, Belbe told the two men that Crovax was probably responsible for the disappearance, and with his command of flowstone, he could also create a tunnel straight through the death pits to anywhere. Well, not anywhere, it's not like a portal, but you get it.
Yeah. It's going to gobble up those
He's
6,000
like,
people.
I can show you the word.
Just a pile of dirty carpets. He's like, my carpet's burned.
Oh, no.
Yeah, instead of Selenia being trapped in a like an artifact, it should have been a pile of carpets.
A pile of dirty carpets.
I like that it's evolved into a pile of dirty carpets now. That always makes things... Something that's funny making it dirty always makes it funnier. So, when they arrived at the ruins, they, confirmed that the hostages were gone, and they followed the footsteps. But instead of going into the death pits, they climbed over them to a plain covered in knee-high yellow grass opposite the Stronghold Causeway. So Eric was right about the grass. I guess I forgot about the grass. Yeah,
It's good.
Nice.
So once there, he probably just read the book. That's what happened.
Yeah.
So.
Eric reads every book that you do so that he can guess right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he critiques it silently, like, huh. 2 stars on Goodreads.
Go check out my blog.
So, once there, Belbe spotted a smudge on the horizon. A crowd of people, she thought. But when they arrived, it was actually a series of sharp poles jutting from the plain, and near the top of each one was one of the hostages, or one of the few stronghold guards Crovax had led out of the ruins. Belbe, Ertai, and Dorian were horrified to learn that in the past few hours, Crovax had impaled every one of the hostages and guards on a spike of flowstone he jutted from the ground.
Oof.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like...
It kind of ruins the point of having hostages, Crovax.
Yeah.
Kind of does. He's not sweating it, though.
He's such an oaf.
Yeah, he's bad. He's bad.
He's like, you don't love me? I fucking hate you.
I'm gonna kill all your
Stupid
hostages.
bitch, I love you.
Oh.
And then he's like, I don't know how to do anything. I'll just kill everybody.
I think we should have had you playing Crovax. So with each death, Crovax became more powerful. A great example of this is that he was so powerful now that he could, when he created a shape out of the flowstone, that shape would remain. So, all those spikes just standing there. Before, he would have to concentrate to keep them like that.
Ooh, cool. Neat.
Neato. So that being said, the 3 of them still hadn't found Crovax. As they made their way through the columns of flowstone spikes, they found the center, which was a clear space 20 meters wide. He was sitting at a flowstone table and surrounded by Mogs when he noticed Belbe's arrival. He welcomed her, and her first question was why he would kill the hostages when the repercussions could be so catastrophic.
With all respect, Excellency, you don't know what you're talking about. I was with the army when we were ambushed by the rebels. There were Dahl en-Vec warriors with the Sky Shroud elves.
So you avenge your defeat on helpless old people and children?
Yes. As Heavenkar, I will brook no resistance to my rule. The only law of the realm shall be obey or die.
You're not Evankar yet.
Then declare me so. Now!
There are other factors to consider.
What? Him?
Crovax whipped a knife off the table and thrust it at Ertai.
I can kill him without even leaving my chair.
We've seen what you've learned to do. Your mastery of the flowstone increases daily, but you lost a battle and a sizable part of your army with it. You show little understanding of how people should be governed, relying on naked force instead of statesmanship. In short, Crovax, your methods are inefficient, and as far as I'm concerned, the issue of who will succeed Volrath is still unresolved.
You constantly amaze me, Excellency. Of course, you're right. We'll see in the coming days who the best man is, won't we?
We will.
Oh, we will.
I hope so.
Crovax is toxic. He's a toxic man. Because, he's like, give me what I want right now, woman. And then she's like, no, you're bad. And there's other things to consider. And he's like, okay, I guess I'll be good for a little bit while longer until you pick me.
She's like, wash those carpets while you're at it.
Yeah, I could just imagine him sitting on a chair on his floating dirty carpets.
And it's like the kind of, we're talking like the kind of unkempt carpets that are left over like after you carpet a few houses and you're a carpet company.
Is that what
It's like that's the kind of carpets, like the leftovers. Right after that, Crovax teleported away, leaving Belbe, Ertai, and Dorian to make the trek back to the stronghold on their own. But just to be clear, I'm not sure yet if Crovax can teleport other people with him or things when he goes. I guess he can teleport his clothes, obviously, so he should be able to teleport other people. Otherwise, he'd teleport naked.
Yeah.
And he doesn't.
Good point.
Okay. So, by that point in the story, Eladamri, Tant Jova, and their rebels had made it to the Eye of Corre, which was a flat-topped mound created over the course of several centuries by the Sky Shroud elves. It was at the Eye that the elf tribes gathered to celebrate their most solemn ceremonies, like Christmas. and when they arrived, the oracle was already there. She had erected a tent without a door, and Tant Jova informed Eladamri that the door would appear when she was ready for him. And so they waited a while, and then the door appeared, and Eladamri went inside.
Are you the Oracle en-Vec?
I'd hoped your first question would be more intelligent.
Startled by her impudence, the elf leader replied,
What is this? Did you admit me to snipe at my wits?
Peace, O Eladamri. Take no offense at my free tongue. When past, present, and future exist in your mind at the same time, it's difficult to spare enough thought for manners.
She raised her hand. Eladamri had heard the oracle was an aged crone, but the face he saw was as fresh as an open lily. He took her to be no more than 15 years old.
I'm much older than that. What you see is an illusion I will you to see.
You read minds.
When they're simple enough. I peer behind the thinker's eyes and read his words before they form on his lips.
More insults. Why am I here, O Oracle?
Your cause is just, O Eladamri, and your triumph's genuine, but final victory is beyond your grasp.
All things are possible with God's help. Are you telling me the rebellion is doomed?
It will never succeed on Wrath.
He didn't want to believe it. For all his invocation of the gods, Eladamri was a realist, believing first and foremost in Eladamri. It rankled him for this ancient oracle, this freak, to tell him flatly his cause was hopeless.
Not hopeless. You will defeat your enemies one day, Elf Lord, and be hailed as the savior of a world not your own.
Enough vagaries. Tell me something useful. What is Crovax doing at this moment?
Blood and more blood. He feasts on their lives.
Speak plainly. I must know Crovax's doings.
I cannot speak it.
This is useless. Can you tell me nothing of value?
Two things, O Eladamri. Your destiny lies in the stronghold, not in the forest or on the plain. A door will be offered to you, and you must enter. To do otherwise is to doom all you cherish.
The stronghold. Should I attack there before a new Evankar is chosen? Is this what you are telling me?
No, no attack on the stronghold will succeed. It will fall to the quietest of all, no man, no elf. You must go there in chains, O Eladamri. Go in chains. The dead one will open a door for you, and you must go.
I don't understand. Will I be captured? Is that what you mean?
Just then, the tent filled with smoke, and the oracle began to disappear.
Where will this door take me?
Her only reply was a fading whisper.
To a land of light and color. Go there, and be the Corvec doll.
Then she was gone.
R.I.P.
Whoosh.
No, I'm kidding.
So Eladamri left the tent and informed Tant Jova and Darset that he planned to travel to the stronghold under the guise of giving himself up. But he needed a band of stronghold soldiers to take him there, so Darset and a mixed group of elves and en-Vec donned some wrathy armor and prepared to travel with Eladamri to the stronghold. And one of the doll that went with him was the famous Lynn Civvy, who was Tant Jova's granddaughter.
Oh.
She's
Hey there, doll. Doll face.
The listeners will know her if you've ever played against a rebel deck in Commander. She's usually the mono white commander.
Because that's
Yeah.
common.
I have played against the rebel deck, and it killed me.
Yeah, it got me too. So, just as they were preparing for their journey, the survivors from Predator's last massacre arrived and informed them that the Scourge of Skyshroud was airborne once more. So, although Predator's weapon systems weren't yet operational. With that in mind, Eladamri's trip took on a second objective, destroy Predator before she was fully operational. And off they went. R.I.P. So by that point, Grevin, with Crovax's army in tow, had returned to the stronghold, and word had spread through the crater city about the massacred hostages. There was a bit of unrest, but no full-scale uprising materialized. The city's inhabitants wouldn't attack the citadel, while Grevin and Crovax were present for fear of another massacre. Kind of like when your boss is around, you don't want to be like too
Sure.
bad.
Mm-hmm.
Stay off your phone and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So after Belbe and Ertai returned to the stronghold, she shared with him why she'd been trashing the dream halls, because I'm sure we were all wondering. Turns out she didn't really like Crovax, not that any of us do, but she also wanted to hurt him. She wanted to break every bone in his body and then do it all over again. And destroying the dream halls was just a surrogate for her hatred for him. And so I'm explaining this because she wasn't designed to feel one way or another about anything. She was designed to choose the best person for the role of Evankar, meaning that she was having a bit of an existential crisis. And Ertai's response was pretty good, actually. He said that she should feel how she feels and not worry about it. I think that's good advice for everybody.
Hakuna
Yeah,
Matata.
don't.
Yeah, exactly. So, then she shared that she'd also been having feelings about him, Ertai. Sexy feelings.
Oh.
She couldn't act on them, though, because of the lens Abcaldro implanted in her torso before she arrived on Wrath. And while her masters could watch everything she did, she was also supposed to carry out her orders. So Ertai offered to use magic to blind the lens. Neither of them being sure if such a thing would work, they gave it a try. And afterwards, Belbe asked,
Did it work?
There's no way to know for certain.
Then she draped her arm around his neck and said,
I don't care anymore. I'm tired of being a lens. I want to be alone with you, if only for a little while.
Then they banged.
I think we're alone now.
R.I.P.
And that's where we'll pick back up for the conclusion of Nemesis.
Damn!
Nice.
Is this a Belbe in the picture?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's from the back. That's like the back art of the book.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's great.
I'm guessing this is Ertai.
Yeah. Yeah.
Think
Yeah.
of how he's standing. Like if
Yeah,
if your head is out that
crouching.
far, but then it's still straight, and you're like looking to the left. Like
Oh, he's got a long neck. Yeah.
Like how how does that
He's like, I'm getting ropey.
how does that work?
It's really weird.
That looks
He looks.
inhuman.
It does. He looks so finky in this picture. He's like, I'm a fink. You know,
Yeah.
you could probably like really easily
Think it up.
don a Ertai costume. You would
Yeah.
just have to put on a dark goatee.
Yeah.
Like your hair is very similar.
Yeah. Yeah, you could do
and
that.
I
You should walk around
And I
like
think
this the whole
this
time.
I'm a fink.
I think this is. I'll just be a fink. I'll just go as a fink. People are gonna get that. I'll be like, I'm this guy from Magic. They're gonna be like, you mean a fink? So I think this is actually also like the first sex scene in the novels that we've covered. Like sex has been like hinted at, but this is actual like it's not explicit at all, but it does like
Oh, it
Like,
goes into
they-
details. It's not
They
like
go.
fade
They
to black.
they
Like,
going through
a
the rear.
little-
Is what you're saying?
a little bit. Yeah,
Nice,
they do a little
nice.
bit. They follow from the rear for sure. Yeah. So, anyways, next week we'll cover Crovax's final attempts at becoming Evankar, as well as Eladamri's visit to the stronghold, and we'll find out if anyone can truly escape from Wrath.
Crovax won't be the Evankar, obviously.
Okay, we're taking bets.
Yeah.
Excellent.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening. Stay tuned for our conclusion next week. Ainsley, thank you for joining us as always.
Thank you for having me, gentlemen.
And thank you and Riley for your wonderful voice acting abilities. That's what I've been enjoying most about these episodes lately. Yeah, just check us out on all the platforms at Turn One Soul Ring, the podcast. We have a Patreon, Turn One Soul Ring, or patreon.com/Turn One Soul Ring. And if you want to get in touch with us, the best way to do that is on Instagram. Just DM us at Turn One Soul Ring, the podcast. So until next week, everybody.
Thanks all.
Bye now.
See ya.
Bye.
Dirty carpets.
See you around.
Where can I get some dry cleaning?
Yeah.
Turn one soul ring.
Low batteries. It's not plugged in.
Low battery. Plug me in, you shit. Yeah. Oh.
Carpets.
Carpets.